Welcome, everybody, to the newest episode of Noahgenda. Today, I have Sean Garvey here with Dwellinspect. Sean is a master inspector and somebody I've known for a long time now. I think we were introduced originally by our mutual friend, Trevor Halpern.
That's true.
And you and Trevor go back even farther than that. But for people who don't know you, Sean, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thank you, Noah. I appreciate it. Let's see, how far do we go back?
Go back as far as you want to go back.
So I grew up in Phoenix. I'm actually third generation Phoenician. I product of Central Phoenix, went to Madison schools, Brophy, Arizona State. And after graduating Arizona State, I took off and moved to Hawaii for 12 years or 7 years, then to Seattle, and then back to Hawaii for 12 years. While I was out there, for the first part of it, I bartended for a long time, worked and lived pretty close to the beach, learned to surf, had a ton of activity outside. And then then at some point in that process, I decided that the Peter Pan syndrome had to wear off. And so I decided to got into some project management and open a home inspection business. I opened a home inspection business out there called Diamond Head Home Inspection, still in existence at this point. And then with the pending birth of our second child, we decided to move back to Phoenix. We reached out to our mutual friend, Trevor Halpern.
Yeah.
And he helped us find a house. We settled into the city here again. And then I opened Dwellinspect in 2016. The end of 2016.
What took you out to Hawaii from Phoenix in the first place?
Yeah, killer question. So having grown up here, I realized that I needed a change of scenery, see what else was existing in the world.
Yeah.
And I had always wanted to live by the ocean. So my two options were between moving to Hawaii and moving to, I was looking at Hermosa Beach at the time. And so I weighed the options and I figured it was just going to be a year. And so I got on a plane, moved out to Hawaii. Lived in a house with a bunch of roommates, and the first year was up like that.
Yeah.
My second day there, I'll remember it forever. But we went on a boat. It was probably a booze cruise, so to speak, and it was a sunset sail. And as it took off and kind of crested through the waves, there was a bunch of dolphins, like a pod of dolphins falling behind it and doing flips and stuff. The sun's going down, the music's on, and I'm like, I might be here for a while.
Maybe I'll be here longer than a year, like day 2.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
It's pretty wild.
Did you know the people you moved out there with? Or was this like, I'm just going to find my way out there?
Yeah. I had one of my friends out there, went to college with. He was doing a externship in a restaurant out there on the beach in Waikiki.
That's awesome.
And he had just graduated culinary school, and that was part of the process towards graduation. And so he had been out there about 6 months, I think, 7 months. And then he kept telling me how great it was. So I moved out there and we became roommates with a couple other people that he just met off probably Craigslist
or whatever,
or
it
like
was.
MySpace or something. So yeah, good question. But yeah, it was a really, really great chapter. I would never trade it for anything.
Yeah.
It was awesome formation of who I am today.
I mean, that's amazing. So if you're out there and you're living in Phoenix and you want to get to the beach, know that it's possible.
Yeah.
You like really make it work.
Yeah.
All right. So you're in Hawaii, you're living, this great life of a young man, surfing, bartending, probably I would imagine having a lot of fun. How did you end up navigating towards home inspections?
Yeah. So I linked in with, a couple different paths. One, I always wanted to start a business. And so when I came back from Seattle, I actually had the intent of starting a brewery, believe it or not. There was no craft beer scene at the time was really taking off, and there was no real stamp on Oahu or in Honolulu in itself. And so I had wanted to move in that path, but then we discovered that my wife was pregnant, and I realized that I couldn't produce a brewery and be poor forever. And so a friend of mine that was there, he was my senior and still a friend that I had gotten to know for years at the bar that I had worked at. He had been suggesting home inspections for a long time. And I was working and doing some side work with an investor and helping to manage some of his flips. And so it kind of just morphed into the right scenario.
So you'd had some experience, at least around real estate.
Right.
This was something that you'd thought about, a friend brought up, and you said, okay, this is going to be, maybe for lack of a better term, but like the grown-up job.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm not going to tend bar. I'm not going to start a brewery. Like,
Right.
I've got some real responsibility. This is like a real potential career.
That was the day I grew up.
There you go.
No, in reality, actually, I worked, I was growing the business and I still bartended to support because it takes a while to start a business, get any traction in it. And so the nice thing about bartending is you can work from like 4 o'clock in the afternoon to midnight.
Yeah.
And so from 7 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock, I was working on growing my business and networking and meeting people. And then it got to a point where I was not able to work at the bar. I got down to 2 days a week. And then one day my manager called me in and said, hey, we need to have a talk. And I was like, great, we need to have a talk too. It's time to go.
But that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be a big moment for you where you're like, hey, I can kind of turn this in. Like, I have turned this into a full-time thing.
Yeah, it was a great full-time thing.
How many inspectors are there on that island? I mean, it's not a huge population, right? It's the biggest population in Hawaii is Honolulu, right?
Yeah.
But how many, is this like a ton of inspectors? I feel like there's a ton of inspectors in Phoenix. How many are there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't even know. It's an unlicensed state. So there are
really?
12
Okay.
unlicensed states in the United States.
Yeah.
California being the biggest. Honolulu has about 1 million people in population.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
And you say in Phoenix, there's a lot. There's in the entire state of Arizona servicing, what are we, like 6 million people? Yeah. There's less than 1,000.
Oh, geez.
There's less than 1,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think I just, like my view into it is skewed because I'm around like the results of an inspection all the time.
For sure. Yeah.
All right. So you start this inspection company.
Mm-hmm.
You grow it to the point where now this is your real business. This is your full-time career. And then you say, hey, you know what's a great idea is we're about to have another kid is to start over again in a totally new city where you had obviously a lot of ties having grown up here. What did that look like though? I mean, how did that decision come about? And then when you got here, what did that look like starting from zero again? Yeah,
for sure. Great question. So you're right. I got it to a point where I had some employees out there and I sold it to the purveyors that still own it at this point. We have a really great working relationship still.
That's awesome.
I moved to Phoenix about a month before the birth of my daughter. So it was actually really cool. We had some time together, about 6 months it took me to get licensed. And in that 6 months, instead of staying idle, I reworked and rewrote my entire business. So I wrote all our systems, handbooks, tried to think of everything I could at that time so that I could roll it out and do it differently. Because the first business I worked 6 days a week, 11 hours a day, 12 hours a day. And lo and behold, the second business I worked 6 days a week, 14 hours a day. So even though I tended to do it differently, I did it the same way.
Yeah.
But it was cool. I had a nice 6 months of retirement.
Yeah.
Right? And then from there, we hit the ground running. And I was literally down to the last, I had two kids, a wife, a new house, and then 2 kids in school. And I was down to my last $10,000.
Yeah.
And so money was burning pretty quick.
Yeah.
Things
when
are
it's not
urgent.
coming in, it's going out fast.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how that happens.
Yeah.
Right? So I got down to the last little bit and I hit the ground running and fortunately got some early traction and started doing inspections again. And that's probably why I put myself into a scenario where I had to work 12 to 14 hours a day.
Yeah. And how long ago was that now? How old
That
was
was-
Dwellinspect?
Yeah. The first inspection was like October of 2016.
Was it one of Trevor's properties, your first inspection here?
No, it
Oh,
wasn't.
okay. I thought he said it was.
It was
I hope
pretty
I'm
close.
not like crushing his dream.
I mean, yes, it was.
All right. So that's a long time. Now, what was the difference? What was it like going from, I didn't even know there were unlicensed states. That's news to me. What was it like going from an unlicensed state where you were a professional, you ran an inspection business, right?
Yep.
To now coming to a licensed state?
So in Hawaii, you relied on your credentials of trade associations.
Okay.
So there were tests that you could take and designations that you could put after your name, or say you were part of this group or that group. And in Arizona, there's a licensing. Or it's actually a registration. It's called the Board of Technical Registration. With that, you have to pass the national exam. You have to perform 30 parallel inspections. You have to do some fingerprints, background checks. You have to pay a check. And I feel like I'm forgetting something because I'm on the spot, but I'm not sure. But that's basically it. So there's some training involved. You get to know the city, you learn some new stuff.
Yeah.
Because the markets and the construction's a little bit different too.
Sure.
Sorry. You have to have a report reviewed.
Okay.
I forgot.
So you write, when you say parallel inspection, that means like 30 inspections where you're with somebody who's experienced.
Correct.
And you're being shadowed by them or shadowing them.
You're shadowing them.
And then you write yours and it gets reviewed.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Peer reviewed by the BTR.
That sounds like a much more involved process. Although I don't know. I mean, do you feel like there's a difference having seen it from both sides, licensed versus unlicensed? Or is it that, hey, you have to get all these certifications anyways in Hawaii, or like these designations that show what you know?
Yeah.
Is it the same, or do you feel like it's a different standard?
It's certainly a different standard.
Yeah.
Anybody can print a card in an unlicensed state.
Yeah.
And
call themselves
an inspector. And, ultimately the market's going to figure that out.
Right.
But there's some people that are probably going to get burned before the market figures it out.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have the background check regardless. That offers an accreditation. I mean, we're in people's houses and there's a level of trust that needs to, or not even trust, but vetting that needs to occur for them to accept them in the house, and so that it's safe.
If somebody's not familiar, obviously, our spheres are largely real estate,
Sure.
But if there's somebody who doesn't know, like what's the purpose of a home inspection? Like if let's say you got a first time home buyer who's looking at this, listening to this, and they're like, what does this even mean? What's the purpose of the home inspection?
Yeah, great question. So the CAN response is a home inspection's non-invasive, non-destructive mechanical and structural evaluation of the property that most people are going to purchase. Yeah. Sometimes it's used in a selling condition as well, so that the seller can better understand the condition of the property. But for the most part, at least in our market, like 95% of the inspections occur at the purchase. And so probably back in the 70s or so when this all started, maybe early 80s, late 70s or so when the industry really started. So it's kind of an immature industry.
Yeah.
Realtors were getting sued because people were buying houses and then experiencing problems. Yeah. And the realtor being the fiduciary, say it again? Fiduciary. Thank you. Realtors being the fiduciary. Man.
You got it.
Fiduciary. Realtors being the tour guides of that.
Yeah. It's the person that the client is experiencing their transaction through. It's just the realtor.
Yeah. So people are moving in and they're like, the electrical is messed up, or, hey, my AC broke. And they started bringing in contractors with a sheet of paper, a pen and paper, and a clipboard, and they'd evaluate the roof, the structure, the electrical, and the plumbing. Nothing more.
That's
four
it.
Things.
Yeah.
And so that has evolved over time to what it is. And it's basically like a Carfax for a house.
Yeah.
To put in kind of simple terms.
Yeah. It's like a mechanical evaluation of your home and the major systems, right?
Learn the age of the AC unit, condition of the roof, things that a general homeowner isn't going to know because they're walking into a house looking where they're going to hang their TV.
Yeah.
And put their couch, and will this room work for their kids and their family?
Right.
Yeah. Blinded by the shiny object.
And they don't have the expertise to look at it and be like, oh no, this is a problem.
Right.
Like this is an issue. And that's where you guys kind of come in and help the buyers. Like, hey, these are the major issues. Now I remember on our inspection, when we bought our place, there were some really, there were some important systems, I guess you'd say. Yeah. Not that some things are unimportant, but that's the reality. So like, AC, the roof, if there was like a foundation issue, those kinds of things, like those are major things. Right.
Right.
But I remember they also put in the inspection that like the hinge to the RV gate outside, like the hinge was not mounted perfectly vertical. It was like this instead of this, like barely, I wouldn't have noticed it.
Right.
But it was in the inspection.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that at least for ours, like that was the level of detail that inspectors use, and they'll go through it, and it's thick, right? Like it's a lot of information
Yeah.
when we've seen inspections, and they'll tell you everything. But I imagine part of what you do is help a consumer wade through, hey, like these are the easy fixes,
Yeah.
like that's cheap, that's easy, and then these are the major ones. Like the inspection's probably a pretty comprehensive document, but I imagine part of what you do is like, hey, this stuff is inexpensive. Handyman, are you a handy person? You could do it.
Right.
And then, hey, these are the things that are really important.
Yeah. It's grown a lot from that 1-page document
Yeah.
and the clipboard, consumer. And as point of inspectors trying to differentiate themselves, they become more thorough.
Yeah.
But as well as the ability to take more pictures with technology.
Yeah.
So more and more is making it into the report. The expectations of us finding bigger stuff has gotten higher.
Yeah.
But we always ask people though to concentrate on health, safety, habitability.
Yeah.
And then some things that are going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because the replacement and repair of items in a house, just specifically in the last 4 to 5 years, has grown pretty substantially. Skyrocketed.
Yeah.
So it tends to be another point of negotiation at that point. Depending on the market, shall we say.
Yeah.
But in reality, it just can help people understand whether or not they want to purchase a house.
Are inspections required for somebody to buy a home in Arizona?
No, they're not.
Not required, but highly, if you're buying a home, highly recommended.
Yeah, there's a point where I'm going to look into get an inspection. Hopefully it's with us, but it's okay if it's not.
If it's not, get it done.
Yeah.
I know a lot of consumers get confused about the difference between an inspection and an appraisal.
All the time,
right?
All the time. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit too?
Sure. Yeah. So inspections are not required. Appraisals are required by the bank because they're giving you money for the value of the house. But an appraisal is a better understanding of the value of the house so that the bank can feel comfortable if the person defaults on their loan.
Yeah.
And an inspection is a buyer protection or a due diligence so that the buyer can better understand the condition of their house.
Yep. I think that's a perfect way. The way I'm a car guy, so the way I explain it to people is I'm like, you could think of your inspection as taking your car to the mechanic.
Right.
Like they're going to tell you all the issues that you have and the cost to repair these issues and which ones are more severe and less severe and maybe the time length over which some of these things are going to need to be done. Whereas if you're going to go sell your car at auction, they might have somebody who comes and tells you what your car's worth, but it's probably not a mechanic.
Yeah. And
they're probably not going to get very deep into the systems, but they'll tell you, hey, comparable car sold at auction for this much. But they're not going to tell you about all the mechanical issues because that's not what they're trained to do.
For sure.
So if you were wondering what's the difference between an appraisal and inspection, there you go.
Here we have it.
There you go.
You're welcome.
New builds. So in Arizona, there's a lot of new builds.
There are, yeah.
There's a ton, and they continue to show, and they, I would say, especially over the past 2 years, as rates have come up, and these builders can build in some extra margin on a new build and then give a bunch of concessions back. It is a very attractive scenario for a lot of buyers, but I would also say a lot of first-time home buyers because sometimes at lower price points further out on the outskirts of town.
Sure.
Now, somebody might say, Sean, this is a new home. Like, what do I need an inspection for?
Yeah.
But that's probably not the right way to think about it, right? On a new home.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Homes are built by people. It's just smart logic. If you're going to spend 400,000, 500 million, couple million, just get an inspection on the house.
Absolutely.
The discovery can be fantastic. And there's also warranties, just like you're buying a new car. Some of the warranties expire in 10 days, some expire in a year, some expire in about 2 years. And in reality, there's longer warranties on there as well, as dictated by the ROC or the Register of Contractors on there.
Okay. And have you found stuff on new builds that you were maybe, of course, without saying names, but found things at new builds where you maybe were surprised, like, holy smokes, this is a new home, and you were surprised by some of what you or your guys found?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely quality issues. Sometimes the AC won't kick on. Ducts can become detached. So there's always stuff that becomes apparent. And quite frankly, a lot of these project managers are managing a lot of houses. And so it's hard for them to catch everything.
Yeah. So it's like a second set of eyes on, hey, this
For
is a
sure.
new build. But to your point, it's not a factory. I mean, we talked about an analogy for cars with the appraisal and the inspection. Cars are largely built by machines.
Right.
These homes are all built by hand.
Yeah.
There's a guy doing the stucco.
Yeah.
There's somebody installing the window, right? All these things that I would suppose leave room for something to go wrong.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's all done by humans, and it just it's a great way to double check and protect your investment.
Yeah. And that's the largest purchase most people are going to make.
Yeah.
So it's probably worth a couple $100 that it's going to cost for an inspection
Yep.
on your new build.
Yeah,
Especially
absolutely.
to your point, given that there are warranties. So this work can be done for free when it's in the new section, where if it's a few years down the road, it could be really expensive.
For sure. Yeah.
Awesome. So if you're buying a new home,
Get an inspection.
please get an inspection.
Yeah.
Hopefully with Sean, but please get it with somebody. What's the, I don't know, worst or weirdest thing you've ever found in an inspection, or one of your guys if it wasn't you? But what's like the strangest or the worst thing that you guys have ever seen?
So I've been thinking about that because we talked a little bit
Yeah.
the other day. And one of the things I like to talk about, or it's a story that I always try and tell all the new inspectors that we bring on the team. It's the worst house I ever inspected, but the story behind it is really cool. So here's the quick story. And this is early in my career when I was living in Hawaii.
No.
And this is so Phoenix is now like $400 a foot, right? Or
Yeah.
more. But it used to be like $100 a foot. This one, Hawaii, was like $400 a foot.
Yeah.
$400 a foot.
Yeah.
And it was in the middle, just outside of Waikiki. The house was post and pier, so it was a raised structure, and you can get underneath it. And there's a bunch of trash, and they had awful plumbing, awful windows, mold, termites. Like the roof was like this thick from all the years they've been putting shingles on there. The gas water heater had like torching all up and down the walls. The wiring was from like the 30s, right? So the house was like, it was bad.
A
right?
mess.
And I did the inspection on Wednesday because I couldn't meet the clients. I couldn't do the inspection on Thursday, but I met the clients on Thursday. And that evening, the agent texted me and she was like, how was the house? Because she was worried.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is like a $750,000 house.
Yeah.
$700,000.
And this was how long ago?
Probably 2015.
So 2015, this is a $707,000.
Yeah. This is when Hawaii was, and it still is, real expensive.
Yeah.
So the agent texted me and she was like, how was it? Right? ? And I was like, what do I do? I was like, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And then, but I refrained from going further on there. We'll just talk about it when we get to the property. Yeah. And I took the guy and his son when we met and we talked about the house, and I took him through every part of it. Thinking like he's going to freak out.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, it was like, do you have any more questions? And he looks at his son and he's like, son, this is the best I can do for you. But now it's our home and we're going to make it nice. And so it was really cool. He took this really awful house and their spin on it. What I didn't realize was that it was an upgrade, right?
Yeah.
I found out he was an immigrant that moved to the United States, started at a low level position, now is an engineer of a big building, was living in a 1-bedroom house with his wife and 3 kids or 4 kids. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
And so to them, this was a huge upgrade. So what I thought was the worst house I ever saw,
right,
was their pot of gold.
And he was like, okay, this is what we can do.
We're going to paint it. We're going to love it. We're going to fix it up and make it ours. And so
awesome.
It was pretty cool.
That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen something totally bizarre? Like the strangest, like a strange fix, something bizarre that you've seen in a home?
Every day. I mean, that's what keeps us employed, right? Like, it's the homeowner handyman that gives us job assurance.
Yeah. Before we moved to Arizona, we lived in West LA.
Yeah.
And we lived in a home that was built in 1939. And, the colloquialism that a real estate agent would use is charming.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's charming. And what charming meant, though, as the owners of that home, was every time, one, it was small, but 2, every time something would go wrong and we'd call somebody to come fix it.
Right.
Invariably, it was, never seen it done that way before. And there were certainly, to your point, like the homeowner who's the handyman, the garage, looking back on it, was definitely that situation.
Sure.
Where he'd built all these bizarre shelves and like none of it was level and different pieces of wood. Like obviously he had just done this himself. But perhaps he did that throughout the house because literally every time something would go wrong, they'd be like, huh, never seen it done that way before. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And it just became this joke that my wife and I had that anytime we needed something done, that was going to be the response.
That was it.
Yeah. And it was probably because, we had bought it through an estate sale. I think grandma had passed and left it to the kids and, it hadn't been touched since the 70s. Much like your guy in Hawaii, it was what we could afford. But, over time we made it our own and there were no big, huge problems and it was fine. But that's a really interesting thing that you say about both those things.
Yeah.
Hey, this is the worst house I ever saw. And this was like the dream for these guys.
Right.
And then you probably never know what you're going to see in these inspections.
No, you never do. And most of the time it's not critical.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it can be. Like when you start to mess with electricity, you have bigger problems.
Yeah.
Or you have potentially bigger problems. If you do plumbing wrong, things get wet.
Yeah.
Or gross. But wet.
Wet and gross.
But so it really, I mean, now with YouTube, like you can basically you can do brain surgery and learn how to do it in like 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But you probably don't want me doing that.
No, you probably shouldn't do brain surgery.
But you could fix stuff around your house and you could do a pretty good job.
Yeah.
But there's stuff that you probably shouldn't mess with.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, right? Electrical, plumbing. I can probably look on YouTube and figure out why my dishwasher, where there might be something clogged in there.
Yeah.
But probably not a good idea for me to go any further than
Start digging into that.
Exactly. Like, I can figure it out. All right, I'll call the professional.
Yeah.
That's what happened recently for us. So,
Did he?
Oh, yeah. And it was like one of the prongs on the dishwasher had broken off and gotten sucked in, and they took it out, and then it was done. Then I felt dumb that I hadn't found it. What would you say are some of the most common issues that come up in an inspection in Arizona, in Phoenix?
I mean, outside of things that have aged out, some of the most common issues are probably roof issues.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them go undiscovered because we don't get a lot of rain. It's been 160 something days with only one rain.
It's crazy.
Please, let's get some.
Yeah.
So roof issues, aging appliances systems, maybe aging AC units that aren't functioning quite right. Expansion on the houses, grading, surprisingly, where stuff's pitched towards the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Not of all of it being critical, but we have a relatively young stock here.
We do.
The oldest house in Phoenix, is probably the 30s. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple before that, but, and then there was a big building boom in the 70s and in the 90s and stuff like that. But, usually it's just stuff that's deferred maintenance.
Yeah. That was another thing I remember. We were buying our house. We bought our house, I think, in 2015. And the agent at the time was like, this is a bit of an older home. It was built in 1997.
Yeah.
And for my wife and I, we'd come out of this home built in 1939. We're like, this is an older home? And she's like, well, yeah, I was like, no, everything here's new. So I guess it's all about your perception.
Yeah.
You mentioned this earlier, and it was something I was going to ask you about.
Sure.
Which is an inspection if somebody's thinking about selling the home. I remember when we sold our home in LA, we had talked to our agent, and when we bought the home, there was this room that my wife and I were fairly certain was not permitted. Like the floor sloped, it looked different than the rest of the home. Sure. We didn't know, and so we asked our agent, we're like, hey, should we find out if this thing was permitted? And he's like, no, you shouldn't. And I was like, why? And he goes, if you know it's not permitted, then you have to say this is not permitted.
Right.
He goes, but if you don't know if it's permitted, then you just say, hey, we're not counting it in the square footage of the home. Buyers to verify whether or not it's permitted.
Sure.
Right. And it was like ducted and it was fine, but it was like, to me, seemed like this had been an addition. Is there any similarity when you're going to sell a home or if you do an inspection, like, oh, shoot, now I know these things? Or is it your thought, you can do it because it's going to be found out anyways?
Right. Depends on everybody's selling strategy, right? The hardest part about selling a home is that there's an emotional connection to it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard to separate a business transaction from an emotional connection.
Yeah.
And there are humans involved. And that's why there's real estate agents to help guide the humans.
Yeah.
So the hardest part is to separate that. A home inspection or pre-listing inspection can help to separate that, so
Yeah.
you better understand the condition of your house. You can use that time willingly before you put it on the market and get appropriate quotes for repairs or choose what you want to repair.
Yeah.
It can help you to say that this house or this property is being sold as is.
Yeah.
It can also help you discover things that maybe you don't want to know.
Right.
In reality, another inspector is coming on the buyer side and they should find it. So you may have to deal with it later. But again, it just depends on your strategy. It depends on what the market conditions are.
Yeah.
Do you need to present the best house, or are there 80 people standing outside of your house waiting to buy it and hand you money?
Yeah.
So I think it's a great strategy. It's really transparent.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. You said what percentage of your inspections are on the seller side? Like the person getting ready to list the home or selling the home?
Hardly any.
Hardly any.
Yeah.
Like vast majority are
A handful
buyers.
a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I guess, I guess they figure, okay, we'll deal with it when it comes.
Yeah.
I think to your point also about it being emotional, when you're selling your home, most people have also lived there for years.
Right.
And so they don't realize there are issues because they're just living there.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, homework's fine, right? Like, oh, this is fine. We manage this. Or maybe there is something funky and they get used to it. Like, there's a noise when they turn the shower on or something. And they're just like, whatever, it works fine. Who cares? No difference. And they just, because they live with it every day.
Because you live with it.
But a new buyer is not coming from that perspective.
Correct. They want it to be fresh and new. I've got an outlet in my house that I know doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I find another outlet.
Right. But, and you're the inspector.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
So then, the takeaway right from that is there's no perfect house.
No.
And humans are adaptable.
Yeah.
And so a house doesn't have to be perfect to be livable and to be a home.
Yeah. No, to your point, nobody's house is perfect, right?
No.
I mean, there's stuff that happens.
For the most part, yeah.
The expectation is right. Like on your inspection, you're never getting an inspection. You'll never have an inspection where it says everything here is great.
No, not yet.
No. Right. In all your years doing this, still not yet.
Yeah.
How many inspectors do you guys have now
We have
on staff?
6 full-time inspectors plus myself. We have a handful of part-time sewer scopers as well.
Yeah.
5 part-time sewer scopers. We have 3 remote office, 1 in Pennsylvania, 2 in the Philippines.
Oh,
and then we have a marketing person now too.
That's
a growth
awesome.
person. Yeah.
How has it been? How's that growth been over the past couple of years? To your point, depending on the market, probably determines some strategy.
Sure.
We've been through in the past 5 years, both, ends of a super busy seller has every single ounce of leverage in a transaction to now, which is probably certainly more balanced and maybe in some markets certainly weighted towards the buyer having more leverage, right?
Correct,
The further
yeah.
outside the city center you get, especially in some of the outlying areas, the buyer has all the leverage right now.
Right.
How does that change your business?
It's been a roller coaster to say the least. So I had like 2 years of a normal market, right?
Yeah.
2017, 2018.
Yeah.
And we grew, it's an easier balanced market. It's easier to operate a business.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit and there were a bunch of question marks. And so, it was like 3 weeks of, we still had a little bit of business and we had enough to survive and we were going to be all right. And then it went like off the charts. And that's where I was working, 6 to 7 days a week, fulfilling as much as I could at the time and growing and hiring and building. So fortunately I had an awesome team that ran up with me, some of which are still with us today. And then the interest rates, the train stopped.
Yeah.
Interest rates went from nothing to like 7 or 8%.
Yeah.
And so, we've managed to stay consistent with our numbers and our volume, through that time period. So we've been really lucky.
What's that like? I mean, growing a business in a dynamic market, right?
Yeah.
And everybody, like on our side, same thing, right?
Yeah.
I came into the business in 2017. So 2017, 2018, pretty normal market. I remember that week, like March.
Yeah.
Where for a couple of weeks, like there were some loans where we had one loan that funded, and the next day, the place we had placed it said we're not funding any more loans. And I think it was probably that same time where you're like, oh, like, what's going to happen? Are we going to have any business?
Right.
Right. Like that 3-week period where you're like, is somebody going to feel comfortable going in somebody's home? Is like anybody going to want to buy a home?
Yeah.
And then like rates start tumbling. And then people are like, well, if I'm going to work from my home, I really should like this home.
Let's make it bigger.
And then boom. Right. And then we had these crazy years where it was waived inspection, waived appraisal, over like a million things, right?
Right.
Reality is some people probably ended up in homes that were not their first choice.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe they spent their money writing an offer over list and didn't have the money to do the repairs. I imagine there's fallout now on your side of people who are like either getting ready to sell or realizing like, oh shoot, like even in dire times, I probably should get an inspection. Maybe brings me to another question people should know. If you write a contract and you do like forego your inspection period, right? You say like, hey, or we're going to take it as is. Can you still get an inspection even if you have agreed to not request repairs?
Yeah, you can get an inspection anytime.
Yep.
And I remember specifically during that time period, we did an inspection of a house that the people weren't under contract even yet. There were 2 inspectors there, and then they were accepting offers on like, I don't know, it was like a Sunday, and they were accepting offers on a Monday. So they just wanted to know the condition of the house before they made that big offer on it.
Yep.
But yeah, if you didn't get an inspection, or if you say I'm buying this house as is because there's high demand, you could still get an inspection and understand what you're buying. Yeah. Maybe there's no negotiation on it, but you get the opportunity to exit.
Yeah. I think that's the important thing to remember, right? If you have to write an offer, and we all know real estate is cyclical, there's going to be another time at some point where things get very, very busy again, and where the balance of power goes from a buyer back to a seller. And if you write that offer, important to know, you can still get your inspection. You might not be able to ask the seller to do anything about it, but to your point, at least you know what you're walking into.
Yeah.
Right. And you can schedule out when you're going to do the roof, or when you're going to replace the AC, or when you're going to do X, Y, and Z, walking in eyes wide open, even if it's nothing that you can request of the seller at that point.
Right.
You know, so I think that's good. Something else, not really inspection related, that I wanted to ask you about though, was what it's like growing a business with a young family, and how you balance being a business owner and responsible for the well-being of your employees, but also being a dad, and, you know, your highest priority being outside of work.
Sure.
But a very important aspect of your life, I'm sure, is this business that you built from nothing.
Sure.
So what does that balance look like? How do you manage that?
I wouldn't say that balance is the right word. I think that it's really, really challenging to grow a business and have a family. And unfortunately, some sacrifices are made in that respect. You know, especially when I said, like, we were down to our last $10,000.
Yeah.
And so I made some sacrifices that cost me some time.
Yeah.
And some time that I'll never get back. Fortunately, I had a really supportive family, that understood that most of the time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Megan. But you work to build it. It's another child. And as you grow your business, if you allow it, it will consume you no matter how big or how strong it is. So as we've grown and added areas of responsibility, and other people have taken responsibility in our business, we've managed to quiet down some of those noises, through systems, processes, and awesome team, to help create a little bit more balance that I'm getting back with my family.
That's great.
So it's been really nice the last couple of years.
How do you learn those lessons, right? I think everybody who runs their own business, and in real estate, most of us are, right? Whether you're a lender or a realtor or an inspector or an appraiser, or anybody who's in any industry kind of related to it, is it kind of figuring it out as you go? I imagine having done the same thing in Hawaii made this hopefully a little bit easier. Is it a matter of giving up some of the decision-making and the control because it gives you back part of your life and part of your time?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one, is giving up a little bit of control, more so finding people you could trust.
Yeah.
But I also believe that, and I wouldn't say it was my experience in Hawaii, because I created a carbon copy of the business. Like, I had a business that owned me, instead of owning a business. And so I think you look to books. You find mentorship groups. We all have them in our industry that can surround you with like-minded business people that teach you lessons about systems and business management and accounting and hiring and firing and all that other stuff, decision making. You find mentors. You surround yourself with other business people, and then you carve out specific time for yourself and honor that.
Yeah. So if you're running a business, your recommendation might be to somebody, listen, you're probably in a business that somebody's figured out already.
Yeah.
Or they figured out a similar business, right? Yeah. A lot of parallels can be drawn between businesses regardless of what you're actually doing. But seeking out mentors, coaches, people who have gone through what you might be experiencing now and relying on their help and expertise, implementing systems, repeatable strategies, those kinds of things, to your point, so that you don't end up in a situation where your business owns you.
Yeah.
And you have nothing else outside your business.
Yeah.
Most of us want other things than just their business.
Sure.
I know that's the case for you. You have a beautiful family. I know that's the case for me.
Yeah.
Right. But in those early years, and maybe you can relate to this, I remember in the early years when I was on the lending side, one of the differentiating factors for me was I always picked up the phone. Like,
oh yeah,
didn't matter the time,
text
the
message,
day,
whatever.
Text message, phone call, I'm at dinner, doesn't matter. I'm picking up the phone. Because I had a similar situation to yours where it says I left corporate America. I had 2 kids and a wife and home and bills, and I was going to go do something where I got paid no money, right? When you're on the lending side, unless you're working for a bank or a Rocket Mortgage, you're going to make no money until you start closing loans. And so I knew I was going to have a time where I made no money, and then I was going to need time to build that business. And then it got really busy too.
Yeah.
Right. And you end up, like, one of the strengths was I would answer the phone whenever.
For sure.
All the time, accessible.
10, 11 o'clock at night.
10, 11 o'clock at night, weekends, at the kids' baseball game. It didn't matter.
Dinner time. Yeah.
Dinner time, out to dinner, on a date, whatever. Right. Yep. There was no time that was out of bounds for me at one point in my career. And when you're so hyper-focused on building that business, you start to lose focus on the other things until you realize how it impacts the people around you.
Right.
And it was hard for me to give up that control because I had spent all this time getting that control and doing it all myself. And then it was also hard to then set a boundary.
Turn it
and
back.
Be like, exactly. Yeah. And luckily, similar to Megan, my wife, Lindsay, was super supportive. And also at some point came to me and was like, you can't be on the phone when you come into the house.
Yeah.
Like at night when you get home, you can't be on the phone. And I didn't realize that, right? I just thought like, oh, I'm on the phone. I walk in. She's like, you're home. The kids are happy to see you. I'm happy to see you. You can't. If you have to stay outside, stay outside. So I used to pull into the garage and then I'd be on the phone in the garage. But then they can hear me. And so then Trevor told me, he's like, oh no, I stopped down the street.
Yeah.
So they don't know.
Yeah.
And so now I try to stop down the street if I'm on the phone. And then also it gave me the out to where if I was on the phone with a client and I was getting home, I said, hey, just heads up. I have this rule I've established, and people respect that.
For sure.
And I say, hey, I'm home. I have to go. And they're like, no problem. Talk to you tomorrow. And you realize the reality is the right people, the people you want to work with, are going to respect your time. And if you say, hey, I can't talk at this time, I've got kids practice, right? We were talking earlier. I coached Clay for a long time.
Yep.
Hey, I can't talk at this time. I can talk at another time. Hey, I'm busy here. I have this obligation. Most people are going to respect that. And if they don't, it's probably not your client.
That's true.
So I don't know if that was something similar you found on your end, which was like giving up that control and understanding you didn't have to always be there, because most people are going to understand that if you can do the job, they're willing to wait a few hours to get you.
Well, it's funny, right? Like you mentioned coaching a team, right?
Yeah.
Like you coach a team,
yeah,
and then you bring your business back and it's just you. But that's part of the growing pains too, right? Like I think you have to figure out how to do everything. And I honestly think to grow a business, to start a business, it takes that first time period to get the ball rolling. Somebody has to move it and push it up. But it seems to be really real estate specific, right?
Yeah.
Like there's very little boundaries
It's true.
from realtors to title people to mortgage people to inspectors, because real estate never sleeps.
Yeah.
And so you have to be intentional about carving out that time so that you can have some balance.
Yeah.
Back to that balance. Justin, do you have any Kleenex in this place? Like we're really bearing our souls.
Justin probably relates. People asking him to film stuff all the time and, all over the country, and he's got little ones as well. I think it never does stop.
But that's a good problem, right? Like that means you have a good product.
Yes.
If people are asking to you, a lot of people don't have that problem.
I know. I try to remind myself of that. Is like that these are all the things we get to do.
Yeah.
It's another Trevorism. Like, oh, we get to do this. Like, I don't have to go take Clay to baseball practice. I get to take him.
Changing the framework.
Yeah. I don't have to go to this baseball tournament that he's playing in. I get to go to the baseball tournament. Like, I don't have to do these things. I get to do them. And when people call, I don't have to pick up the phone. I get to pick up the phone because somebody is trusting me to guide them in the biggest purchase of their life. And it's easy to forget that if you're having a bad day or you're busy or you're tired.
Right.
But I think in our industry, to your point, it is a little unique that if you put that in your frame of like, if that's the frame of reference you're using, like, oh, I don't have to do this. I get to do this. Somebody trusts me enough to help with this purchase, which is largely the biggest financial decision that most people are going to make.
Yeah.
I get to help them with this. Like, what an honor that they've chosen me to do it. But it's easy to forget that sometimes.
Well, it's fear driven.
Yeah.
Right? Like, especially when you're starting, what if I don't?
Yeah.
Is constant and prevalent. And that's what, I hate to say it, but like that's needed.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
It's like that little bit of paranoia is needed to get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And then you can find the team that you trust that can help you cover the rest of that time. Read books, the E-Myth, or more real estate centric, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent.
Mm-hmm.
Like those create the foundations and the frameworks to help you move through those channels.
Yeah.
Podcasts. There's a million podcasts out there.
It's true.
1,000,001 podcast out there.
Yeah.
Listen to Noah's podcast. But like there's so many resources at our fingertips that can help you guide the way, but it's still, you still have to do the work.
It's true. You do still have to do the work. And I think that's a unique thing you said. It's when I talked to a friend of mine, he was in a different industry. I think he was like he's like in pharmaceutical sales. And he was thinking about getting into lending, and he asked me, he's like, well, like, what would you recommend? How would you do it? And the reality is, like, I jumped in both feet. Like, I knew nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I knew the real estate agent who sold us our home, and I knew like maybe one other real estate agent from my previous job. And I jumped in both feet, and I had no choice but to make it work quickly. Right. Yeah. I knew I had this much time. We had saved this much money. I knew I had this much time to get it going.
Burn the ship.
Yeah, exactly. And it forced me to get competent quickly and to put everything I had into it. And the reality is, for some people that's going to work. And then for some people, I told them it's probably an easier transition if you go to a bank or you go to a Rocket or you go somewhere. They're just force feeding you leads, and you're not building those relationships yet. And you're going to get an hourly wage or a salary, and the upper end of that opportunity isn't there, but it's a little bit of an easier transition. And I think for some people that's good, right? So for like an inspector, for some people it's probably good. Like, hey, I'm just going to start this way. And then for other people, like, all right, they're both feet in.
Right.
For me, it was, I had no choice.
Same.
There was no alternative, right? You brought your young family here. There was no alternative but for you to make it work.
I was backed into a corner.
Exactly. But, a lot of the time
it worked out.
That's how you build it, right?
Yeah.
So, Sean, is there anything else you think is important for people to know about your industry, about what you do? Or maybe kind of where you think you guys differentiate from other inspectors or other inspection companies that you'd say like, hey, this is something that we're really good at. This is our wheelhouse. This is what you're really proud of about your business.
Yeah. It's a really interesting industry. Like usually inspectors get into the home inspection business because of an experience that they had. So it's filled with a lot of integrity or people who have integrity because they're looking to provide a service or benefit to the people, right?
Yeah.
To the people that are buying houses. So I think there's a lot of great inspectors out there. One thing we really do well is service. I come from a service background. I have the years of experience in bartending.
Yeah.
And then a lot of our inspectors and our team have a lot like high levels of service. And so we really take care of the client and the customer, so that they understand the process that they're buying, so that they understand the product that they're buying and the terms that were talked about, and like really the level of condition of the house, big items, not so big items, stuff you can fix on your own.
Yeah.
So we do that really well. We communicate well. We use technology really well. And we're really proud of the company that we're building.
And sounds like getting more and more thorough every day.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah. I mean, that inspectors just keep getting better at inspections. And that's because we bring in HVAC people and we bring in foundation people to have high level intelligent conversations and learn more about the industry, their industry, so that we can better understand and serve our clients.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It's fun.
I think it is fun, right? Yeah. That's to your point, our business never sleeps, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think it's what keeps people in it long. Like there are a lot of demands on our time.
Sure.
But we stick with it because we really enjoy it. So thank you, Sean. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure getting to know more about your business. For everybody out there, if you are looking for a great inspector, Sean and his crew are fantastic. I know agents who will not use anybody else. And I think that's a big testament to what you do when there are a good number of inspectors in the Phoenix area.
Yeah.
That people have stayed so loyal and committed to using you. So
thanks for having me.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
It was awesome.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.